In an exclusive interview with WashingtonTV on December 18th at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, Michael A. Ratney, press spokesman for the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs, emphasized the centrality of the Israeli-Palestinian crisis to everything else in the Middle East region for President Barak Obama from the first day he took office.
The very first day in office, he appointed a special envoy for Israeli-Palestinian peace because he recognized the importance of that issue to everyone in the Arab world, the broader Muslim world, frankly, throughout the whole world. And so he's committed himself to that for a lot of reasons. One reason because he knows it's the right thing to do, but also because he knows how important it is to others in the region. And because it's so important to others in the region, it becomes an important way of setting a positive and constructive atmosphere to accomplish other things we're trying to do in the region as well.
The vision of President Obama, Ratney went on to say, included seeing Israel living at peace with all its neighbors, even Iran.
But that is the President's vision, is this comprehensive peace in which Israel is living at peace with all of its neighbors, Palestinians, Syrians, Lebanese, all Arabs, even Iran in the region.
At the same time, Ratney said that Iran's opposition to the peace process and support for militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, which he said was a fundamental part of Iran's policy, has created concern for the U.S. administration.
This is a long-standing element, as you pointed out a moment ago, dating back quite a few years. U.S. concerns about Iranian support, Iranian opposition to the peace process generally, and support for groups like Hamas that are opposed to peace efforts between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So it's not something we ignore, and it's a fundamental part of Iranian policy that's of great concern to us and others in the region.
Another one of the chief concerns of not just the American administration, but the international community as a whole in this regard, according to Ratney, is Iran's controversial nuclear program.
One of the primary concerns that arose that's been clear, not just our concern, but a concern of virtually everyone in the international community, is Iran's nuclear program. And that became central to our efforts. And it became central to the efforts of this group that we call the P5+1, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, along with Germany. And that became the principal focus of our conversations with the Iranian government. And in fact, there had been, for the first time in a very long time, face-to-face meetings that involved both U.S. representatives and Iranian representatives. Now, when those meetings started, it was clear to us, it was clear to everybody, that the Iranian government had other things that they wanted to talk about. They had a much broader agenda. But where we focused on, where we began that conversation, was on the nuclear program, because it was there that we found not just our own government, but others in the region, others in the UN Security Council, were concerned about that nuclear program, concerns about Iran's past activities related to their nuclear program, concerns that Iran had not been fully transparent about the nature of their nuclear program. And so addressing those concerns became one of the principal objectives of our engagement.
And among others in the region who share the great concern about Iran's nuclear ambitions is Israel, which is at the same time one side in what the Obama administration considers to be a central concern in the Middle East region, the Palestinian-Israeli crisis. In this regard, Ratney said the U.S. and Israel recognize that they have the same goal and the same concern, but emphasized that the American approach remains testing Iranian intentions through dialogue.
The Israelis feel very directly the threat posed by Iran, particularly their support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, their pursuit of what they strongly believe to be a nuclear weapons program. And because Israel is in the region, they're a neighbor, they're in the neighborhood, they feel those concerns much more acutely than perhaps others that are further afield do. So this becomes very central to Israel's conception of its role in the region. Now, I would let Israeli officials speak for themselves, but I can tell you that we talk a great deal, obviously, with the Israeli government. We talk about our approach to dealing with Iran, our approach to dealing with Iran specifically on this issue of their nuclear program. And I think the Israelis recognize that we have the same goal. We have the same concerns. It's not just shared by us in Israel. It's shared by virtually everyone in the international community about the nature of Iran's nuclear program and some other aspects of Iranian policy. And we believe through dialogue, that's one possible avenue where we can test Iranian intentions.
In order to achieve this objective, Ratney said, President Obama is seeking to change the nature of the relationship between the U.S. and Iran.
I can tell you is that President Obama came into office, and one of his objectives was to change the nature of our relationship with Iran. He looked back historically, and we had had essentially 30 years of animosity, 30 years of estrangement, 30 years in which we had very little contact, certainly very little contact at an official level. And he sought to change that. He sought to change that for a number of reasons. One, President Obama is fundamentally committed to the idea of dialogue, the idea of listening and talking, not just to our friends, but to those who have not been our friends, to our adversaries as well. His feeling is, his strong belief is, that's the way you resolve your differences, is by face-to-face contact.
Ratney, however, emphasized that the Obama administration's desire to engage Iran directly was not naive, and that the U.S. realized that there are many concerns about Iranian policy, which the U.S. shares with Israel, that remain obstacles in achieving this objective.
We're not naive about it. And President Obama is certainly not naive about the chances for success or the chances that after 30 years of this relationship of distance and animosity, we're going to see immediate results. But I think we recognize, the Israelis and others recognize, that we are pursuing this with the intention of not just for the sake of talks, not just for the sake of dialogue, but we're pursuing this because we want to address those concerns in a direct way.
But Ratney said that while in the only direct and face-to-face meeting between American and Iranian officials, the topic of the conversation has been Iran's nuclear dossier. America has not turned its back on those who are calling for reform and greater human rights. He also enumerated some of the U.S.'s specific concerns in this regard.
We have a big agenda, and unfortunately, up till now, we've had very few opportunities to pursue that agenda directly with Iranian representatives. In what has been the sole meeting, essentially, that we had with them, it focused primarily on the nuclear file. But it's important to emphasize that by doing so, by trying to engage Iran directly, and by focusing as we do so intently both with Iran and also internationally on the nuclear file, we have not turned our back on those who are calling for reform, those who are calling for greater human rights inside of Iran. We've been very clear, the President, Secretary of State, and others have been very clear about our support for them, about how they have a right to decent government. They have a right to expect from their government decent treatment, and that we and others in the world are watching the aftermath of this election, the treatment of those who are calling for reform, the trials of people seemingly without evidence in large numbers, people who are being imprisoned, including, may I add, American citizens in many cases. Kian Tajbakhsh, Reza Tagavi, both American citizens of Iranian origin who've been imprisoned by the Iranian government. Don't forget as well, there's American hikers, 3 American hikers who were simply visiting in Iraq and ended up in Iranian custody. Robert Levinson, an American former FBI agent who's disappeared. All of these are part of the agenda that we hope to pursue with the Iranian government, and from the Iranian government hope to find answers. All I can tell you is these are 3 young Americans who disappeared and were arrested by the Iranian government, seemingly without charges. We want them, they want to be back with their families where they belong, and that's what we're asking for, the Iranian government to return them where they belong with their families in the United States.